Right, 2 o'clock. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. Just to note, Councillor Tony Lacey will be acting as chair for the first application item, item 5 on the agenda, Tupton, as it was deferred from the last meeting, which I was unable to attend. Right, item 1 on the agenda. Are there any apologies to be noted?
Yes, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor David Cheetham, who sent Councillor Gillett a substitute, from Councillor Mark Foster. Councillor Stephen Clough is here as substitute. Councillor Peter Elliott, who will be substituted by Councillor Dale, who's just running late, will be here when he can. And also apologies from Councillor Heather Liggett. And I'll just also say at this time, as you've said, for item 5, anyone who wasn't here at the July meeting is advised just to take a seat at the back for that, so you can assure everyone who's here has heard the whole application.
Thank you, Amy. Right, item 2. Members are requested to declare the existence of and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests and or other interests not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have interest to declare?
Chair, do I declare talking on the second application? Speaker?
Yes, fine. Yep,
I should be speaking on application number 25/00522.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Item 3. Any member who cannot determine an application solely on the information presented to the committee at the meeting today is asked to declare that they are predetermined on the item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any predetermination to declare? No, thank you very much, members. Right, item 4. Minutes of the last meeting.
Can I just say that I may have to leave early for the last
item?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Peterson. Item 4 on the agenda is we now have the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of July 2025. An error has been spotted in the list of attendees, which has now been amended. With this, are we happy that they are a correct record? Can we just have a show of hands on that, please? Thank you, members. Right, I'm now going to hand you over to Councillor Lacey, who will be dealing with the next application.
That's on the right.
The first application is in respect of Anchorbold Road, Tupton. The item was deferred at the July meeting when we heard from the public speakers, so we'll pick up where we left off and I'll ask officers to give a recap on the application and address the additional information.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that the application was deferred at the previous Planning Committee held on Tuesday, 29th of July, to allow the applicant the opportunity to submit a traffic impact assessment. Members requested this additional information so that the highway safety impacts of the development can be fully assessed as part of the decision-making process. As set out in the updated committee report, the applicant has provided a statement which details the number of vehicular movements generated in connection with the parcel locker over a set period of time. This information has been obtained from InPost data and is included as an appendix to the officer report. The data provided sets out there have been an average of 22 customer visits to the parcel locker per day. In addition to the recorded customer collections and drop-offs, a single daily collection and drop-off has been undertaken by a courier van. Officers consider that 23 visits to the locker by car or courier van represents a low level of activity throughout the day. On that basis, and in the context of the observed available on-street parking and the brevity of customer visits to the parcel locker for collections and drop-offs, it is not considered that the activities associated with the parcel locker would result in any unacceptable highway safety harm. As set out in the 29th of July committee report, The Highway Authority also raised no objections to the retention of the locker from a highway safety perspective. As set out in the officer report, the parcel locker is considered to represent an acceptable visual addition to the site, which in this location is characterised by small-scale commercial uses. In addition, for the reasons set out in both committee reports, officers are satisfied that the parcel locker would not result in any unacceptable harm in neighbouring amenity terms. Moving on to the slides. Slide 1 shows the site of application highlighted in yellow. The site comprises land to the eastern side of Ankerbold Road. This aerial photograph illustrates the on-street parking which regularly takes place on the eastern side of the road in the vicinity of the application site. Slide 2 shows the parcel locker in situ as installed. The parcel locker is situated within the frontage of the existing garden supplies retailer at Unit 5. Slide 3 shows the parcel locker when viewed from the existing footway looking south towards Station New Road. Slide 4 shows the frontages and driveways of residential properties on the opposite side of Ankerbold Road. And slide 5 shows some of the available parking. This was taken during a visit during normal working hours when a number of the commercial uses were operational. The remaining slides, including the one shown, comprise photographs provided by a local resident. The neighbour email and associated photographs were not received in time to be included in the late representation reports. The first of the photographs provided shows a vehicle parked on the footway in front of the parcel locker. Officers would suggest that the individual parking of users of the parcel locker or other commercial enterprises along this stretch of Ankerbold Road cannot be legislated for. Officers have, however, visited the site on several occasions and have always observed ample parking on-street parking opportunities that would not result in the obstruction of pavements in the locality. The second and third photographs show what is reported to be an attempt by in-post workers to install an extension to the existing parcel locker comprising 30 additional small lockers. It is set out in the representation received that when challenged by the local residents and the tenants of Unit 5 Ankerbold Road, and following several calls to InPost, the extra unit of lockers was unplugged and taken away. Officers are of the understanding that the extension of the existing parcel locker would require planning permission. In this case, the applicant has not sought to amend the submitted application by way of inclusion of an extension of the existing parcel locker. Officers therefore consider that the application must be assessed on the basis of the current submission, which seeks to retain the existing parcel locker as installed without any additional extension. The late representations also request that the previously submitted local residents' photographs and videos be included in the presentation to members. Members will recall that photos were provided in the late representation report for July. In terms of the videos, officers have reviewed the content of the videos and do not believe that they raise any further material considerations that were not covered in the previous late representation report from July. In addition, officers note that further Derbyshire County Council Highways comments have been received, which request additional information to allow for full assessment of the application. Specifically, the request is made in relation to the submission of detailed dedicated parking provision for the InPost locker. Officers are of the view that no such parking provision is in existence on the site, and therefore have sought to assess the application on the basis of the site circumstances as we found them. And officers are of the view, as set out in the report, that the sufficient amount of on-street parking that has been observed would be an acceptable amount of parking that wouldn't result in any activities within the vicinity of the site that would result in any unacceptable highway safety harm. And that concludes the officer presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Are there any questions for the officers? No? Okay. There are no further questions. I will now move on to the debate. No. Do officers have anything they need to add before we move on?
As there have been no questions, Chair, nothing further to add to what Colin said. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Motions. I'm now opening the floor to motions. I'd like to put in a motion that we accept officers' recommendations subject to conditions.
Second that.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, you stole me there, Tony. But yeah, I'll second that. Second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And then can we move on to the vote? Okay, we have 5 in favour of the motion and 1 abstention. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Can I remain here?
If you want to.
Okay.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones, you'll need to speak for the speakers table.
On this item.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Where we got to?
Keep going to town.
Councillor Jones, are you speaking on this item? Do you want to take a seat over there, please? Right then, we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is 25/00522/FLH Drumfield South. This application in respect of 62 Hilltop Road at Drumfield. I'm now going to hand you over to the officer to give us a brief presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the late reps received yesterday from number 60 Hilltop Road, which included a number of photos in views from number 60. Also, figure 5 on page 32 of the committee report pack. The plan hasn't showed very clearly on the printout, so I have included it in the presentation, which we will come on to. The application seeks planning permission for part retrospective single-storey rear extensions, 2-storey side extension and alterations to the existing openings. It is a resubmission of a previously approved extension at 62 Hilltop Road. The site is located within the settlement development limits for Drumfield. The main planning considerations here are the impact on the street scene and impact on neighbouring properties. No statutory consultees have identified any technical reasons as to why the application should be refused. This is an aerial photo which shows the application site highlighted in yellow and the surrounding area. This is the site location plan which shows the extent of the application site outlined in red. The surrounding area is predominantly residential. The existing dwelling benefits from 2 accesses, both onto Hilltop Road. This is the proposed floor plans and the proposed elevations. The application seeks permission for extensions to the dwelling incorporating elements previously approved under planning reference 24/00766 FLH. The current proposal includes modifications to the approved scheme, specifically alterations to the 2-storey extension, an enlarged store, an expanded patio area and the land levels revised on the rear elevation. Just on some photos, this is a photo looking towards the application site on Hilltop Road. And then just back the other way, looking towards the application site. And this is a photo from within the rear garden, which shows the relationship between the extension, the 2-storey extension, and number 60, which is shown on the left. This is the plan which I previously referred to in figure 5, which on the printout hasn't come out clearly. So hopefully that members are able to see that on the screen. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, we now move on to the speakers. We have 3 speakers on this application, the first of which is Councillor William Jones. If you'd like to take your seat. And you have 3 minutes when you're ready, William. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. This retrospective plan application is in the main related to regularising the status of a breach of conditions in respect to the construction of a flat roof extension as opposed to an approved large dormer window. It has 2 distinct elements. Firstly, the impact on the resident of number 60 is addressed in the case officer's report and has been dealt with in the context of LC5C and SDC 12E of the local plan. The neighbour at number 60 historically built a rear dining room, incorporating a roof light, and has enjoyed the benefit from the light and sunlight thus brought into the room for the past 7 years. Even though the case officer's report acknowledges that the flat roof extension would overshadow with the loss of sunlight to the dining room, it has been adjudged to be not sufficient to warrant a refusal. As you will hear, the neighbour does not share this view. Secondly, the original application consisted of an initial submission followed by a revised and approved submission. Even though the build was conditioned by drawing number IM/HR/24/06 revision E, as the build proceeded, the residents perceived that it was not being built in accord with condition 2 of the planning approval. Indeed, the overall perception gained was that it was being built as a flat roof extension as opposed to the approved dormer window, with consequently a greatly enhanced and massive gable end. The breach of conditions was brought to the attention of the enforcement officer, who then considered the options available in the enforcement toolkit. It was considered that the option of inviting a retrospective planning approval was appropriate. It is understood that this is adopted when the enforcement officer considers that the breach has a reasonable prospect of permission being granted. In practice, with this approach, a breach has a high chance of success. As such, it is very easy for a public perception to develop that the concept of a retrospective planning application has become part of an established planning strategy, allowing the managed development of an approved application as the bill proceeds, and thus gain an unfair advantage in a less than subtle and progressive manner. Planning should be answerable to the local residents as a mechanism to, in general terms, manage the design standards adopted, the streetscape and the amenity value. In this particular application, the local residents have the perception that this is not the case. In summary, there's a case to be made in favour of rejecting the case officer's recommendation on the basis of the loss of amenity benefit to the neighbour in number 60 Hilltop being significant. I draw the committee's attention to the supplementary photographs and urge serious reflection on taking this decision. It has the secondary benefit of addressing the Hilltop residents' perception of enforcement. I will now be pleased to take any questions.
Right, do members have any questions for Councillor Jones? No, if you'd like to retake your seat. Oh.
Just to clarify then, what you're saying is...
Is your speaker, it's on now.
The grounds you're asking us to refuse is the impact on the neighbours, as you described. The first part, or the second part of your comments is just a perception that the whole process causes. I understand that right, do I?
Yes.
And are you? We've got the pictures, but have you seen the site yourself? And can you give us any other evidence that might help us determine the impact on the neighbour in terms of the community?
The photographs are quite significant. You can see the height of the extension alongside it. Bear in mind, as I say, that the dining room was built 7 years ago. It's had the benefit for 7 years, and suddenly we have an overshadowing effect. If it had been constructed as a dormer, there would have still been some overshadowing, but at that time it was approved by the neighbour next door. There was no complaint. They were happy with the dormer, but it's the extension and the gross size of the flat roof extension that has caused the problem. All I can say to you is, if you want to feel the impact, go and have a look.
Thank you. No further questions? Want to retake your seat?
Thank you.
Right, the next speaker on this is Stephen Briggs, objecting to the application. Can you just wait till you press the right button on? That's it. When it's red.
Thank you. First mistake.
Okay. Thank you.
Firstly, apologies for not being as prepared for this as I should have. My mum is at end of life in KLO, and that's obviously been my priority. That said, I felt it was important that I attended this meeting to express our views on this retrospective application. The structure as built completely overshadows our property, as I've shown in the photos I submitted yesterday. During the winter months, when the sun is low, there will be no sunlight for a large part of the day entering the dining room via our roof light, and the view from our roof light is completely dominated by this huge gable end. The original application was accepted, and as is evident, there was not a single objection to it, unlike the 13 objections that the planning officers advised in the retrospective application. The accepted application, whilst much bigger than the original bungalow, was sympathetic in design, unlike the square, full two-storey as now built. As can be seen from photo 4, the bungalows situated in this older area of Dronfield have all been modernised and extended. I've extended my own home after applying and adhering to the approved application. As can be seen on the photos, all of the bungalows have retained the overall character of the area, as this would have had it been built to the approved design. The structure now built fails in all aspects to achieve this, falling very short when measured against the objectives laid out in your policies, SDC 12, LC 5 and other local policies. It has been built to maximise the internal space with no regard to the effect the external aspect has on others and the wider community. In many ways, this retrospective application is worse than the original proposal that was withdrawn on the advice of planning due to its mass and street scene. The planning process, if conducted correctly, ensures that the public have faith in it and it is carried out, and if it is carried out in the correct manner, and it should not be able to be manipulated by developers to achieve their sole aim. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Have any members got any questions for the speaker? No, if you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you.
Right, the next speaker on this application is the applicant, Julia Morby. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Right. Press it again.
Oh, sorry, it's gone off now. When the red light's on, it's on.
Yeah.
Yes. That's it.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon. As there seems to be a bit of a confusion as to what we have built at our property, where we were going to be living on Hilltop Road, I would just like to confirm a few points. Firstly, we received planning permission on the 20th of January this year, which is when we started the building work. The original application had a roof line which was slightly higher and further back than the existing, which was not acceptable to the council. The architect then altered the original drawing of the roof line and ridge to be consistent with the existing, which was approved. Once work had commenced on this area, the builder realised that the slope of the roof line to the right-hand side extension was far lower down than the rear flat roof and wouldn't be feasible as per the drawing, which is what the original one. He then built the external wall an extra 1.7 metres out, bringing it in line with the room below, which squared the room off. At this time, he wrongly assumed that this had been passed by the council when in fact this was not the case. As soon as we realised what had been built, we immediately stopped working, which was in June, and approached the council via Mark Osbaldiston of Stacey Architectural to put in for what he thought would be an amended application. After he had spoken to Kerry Wright, we were informed that we had to put in for full retrospective planning permission, even though the majority of the work had been approved. It was only after the planning fee was paid and the drawings had been sent to the council that we found out that some of the local residents, not all immediate neighbours, had started complaining about the rear of the extension. This was a surprise to us, as the back of the house isn't visible from the road, so isn't spoiling the look of the road at all, or indeed from any of the immediate neighbours, due to the rear of the house being about 2 metres set back from our immediate neighbours. They've got an extremely large extension which goes to about 11 metres to the rear. The footprint hasn't increased and there's no detriment to anyone's privacy. The scaffolding may occasionally cast a slight shadow onto our neighbour as it has been erected to a height to be able to finish the roof, so is therefore quite overbearing. As soon as the building work is completed, this will be removed. If the land to the rear of our property is built on, then due to the length of our garden and the size of the proposed building site, any properties built will be at a distance where our extension will have no impact on them at all. One last note, I just want to point out that we applied for the amendment to the extension prior to any of the complaints being made. In fact, several passers-by have commented on how good the house is looking and how we have vastly improved what was a dilapidated bungalow. We have built properties, renovated properties over the years, which we've all lived in every single time, and we've never done anything that we shouldn't have done. We would never have built something which we haven't had permission for, and would ask that the council look favourably on application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for the speaker? No. Thank you very much. Right, that concludes the speakers on this application. Right, it's now time to ask questions of officers. Any questions for officers? No?
It might just help if the officers just explain the recommendation in a little bit more detail, and particularly the aspect that's been raised by the objectors, so that I think I'm clear in my own mind, but it might just help me if you just repeat it, please.
Thank you. So in terms of the recommendation, we do, in terms of the impact on the neighbour, we do recognise that there is an impact on the neighbour. I've been in the dining room myself and seen it from within there. So we acknowledge there is an impact, but officers are of the view that it isn't so significant to be contrary to the policies.
Okay. I've got a question for you then, Kira. Just regarding, the actual approved plans, how much difference has this impacted the neighbours at number 60?
So within the committee report on page... There we go, page 21. It compares the elevations that were approved under the previous permission, and then the elevations that are approved under, that are recommended for approval under the current permission. So the main elevation where you can see the difference is the proposed side elevation, so bottom left plan on both of the two. So you can see on the top one there's a dormer window that is set in from the bottom of the roof slope. And then the difference is shown on the bottom left of the proposed elevations under the current application. So in terms of the height remains the same. It's sort of the length of the dormer element that is different between the two schemes.
Right, thank you.
Can I just add, Chair, the basis of the officer conclusion is as set out in the report, and specifically the issue that Councillor Gillett raised in paragraphs 713, 714, and we've taken into account the orientation of the two properties, the fact that the extension comes out not as far as the neighbouring property, which is the one subject of the speaker speaking to you, and that it only, in an officer view, has an impact on the lantern in the roof. We've also taken into account that there are other windows and means of light to that room, and therefore a combination of all those factors has led us to the view that overall the impact of the extension, that particular element of the extension on the neighbour, is acceptable. It's for those factors as we've set out in the report.
Perhaps if I could just follow that then. It's unfortunate this is a retrospective application, but do I read into what you're saying that had this been the original application, your recommendation would still have been for it to be granted rather than refused?
That is the conclusion of that, yes.
Right, thanks for clarifying that. Right, if there are no further questions, I'm now going to open the floor for the debate. Anybody want to kick us off? No? is there anything else that officers would like to add at this point? Or are you quite happy?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Now opening the floor to motions. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that we accept officer's recommendations with conditions.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Rouse. Right, can we put that to the vote, please? That's everybody, isn't it? 8. Oh, 1 against. Right, thank you, members. That's 7 for and 1 against. So that has been accepted. We're going with our officer recommendation to approve the application. Thank you very much. Do we need to call Councillor Jones back in? See, I'm not allowed to take part in it.
Well, if we start the application, I'll check the thing, but generally you have to be here for the whole thing.
That's what I'm thinking. Right then, members. Now Councillor Jones is back in the room. We'll make a start on item 7, which is 23/008 77/FL Wingworth. The third application is with respect to land to the north of Spindle Drive and east of Dearlands Road at Wingworth. I will now hand you over to the officers to speak and give us a brief presentation.
Chair, just 1 second, sorry. Yeah, it's just because my... Sorry, I can't find my mouse, that's the trouble. There it is. Right, there we go. Right. Sorry about that, thank you, Chair. This application is for the erection of 180 dwellings, including the formation of an access and associated landscaping and infrastructure. The scheme is major development and is a departure from the development plan. We haven't had any other late reps from the ones that were published yesterday. Please note, a site notice and newspaper advert have been recently posted advertising the departure from the development plan. Notwithstanding committee's determination today, no decision will be issued until the consultation dates on these have expired. If, as a consequence of this advertisement, new material considerations are brought to light, we request that these are considered by officers in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Notwithstanding this, the application has otherwise been fully advertised in accordance with the Statement of Community Involvement, and officers are of the view that no one has been prejudiced by the words departure from the development plan being originally omitted from the adverts. The application site is located to north of Spindle Drive and east of Hockley Lane in Wingworth. It can be seen highlighted in yellow on this slide. The site is outside the settlement development limits, which run to the west and south.
The site was subject to an outline application in 2018, which was approved at appeal. At that time, the council did have a 5-year housing supply, but the plan was considered to be out of date. The inspector considered the site to be sustainable given its close proximity to Wingerworth with adequate bus, walking and cycling links. The inspector also concluded that development here would have limited impact on the landscape. Access to the site will be from Dearlands Road using the first section of Spindle Drive. The access will then cross the stream using a bridge. Details of the bridge will be secured by condition if planning permission is granted. There are bus stops on Dearlands Road just to the south of Spindle Drive. Officers have concluded that the appeal history should be given significant weight when determining this application. This drawing shows all the land under the applicant's control. The land outlined in red is the site. The land outlined in blue is the blue line land. This application is not subject to 10% BNG mandatory conditions as it was submitted before it came into force. However, the applicant has committed to providing 11% gain in hedgerows on site, 10% gain in habitats, with 2% delivered on site and the remainder within the blue line land. A gain in watercourse units will also be delivered using a hierarchy of on-site, within the blue line and off-site as last resort. But until the bridge has been designed, this cannot be accurately calculated. Officers have put significant weight on this delivery of BNG. This drawing shows the site in relation to the historic environment record. Note the purple rectangle just outside the northeastern corner of the site. This is Wingerworth Hall walled garden. This is the site layout. The applicant has engaged with officers over the last 6 months to make some amendments and improvements to the design. This has included altering the mix of house types to include more bungalows. The bungalows in the northeast corner have the benefit of limiting the impact on the walled garden. The landscaping scheme has changed in order to deliver more on-site BNG, and the mix of affordable housing has also been amended. In addition to these improvements, the site will deliver 72 affordable units. That's 40% of the total. 54 of these will be delivered as social rent and 18 as affordable rent. This will contribute to delivery of affordable homes in Wingerworth, where there is a need of 35 affordable dwellings per year. Officers note that there is a lack of allocated sites left in the current local plan to deliver these required affordable dwellings going forward. The following 2 slides are reminders from our site visit this morning. But this is where the access will leave Spindle Drive, and this view to the western part of the site with Hockley Lane to the west and Spindle Drive in a distance to the south. This site is outside the settlement where policy SS9 of the local plan and policy W2 of the Wingerworth neighbourhood plan do not normally support development of this type. As the council has a 5-year housing supply, such policy context carries significant weight against the proposal, and the tilted balance as set out in the National Planning Policy Framework does not apply. The development will result in limited harm to the walled garden non-designated heritage asset and the wider landscape. These factors also weigh against the development. However, officers are of the view that the following factors weigh in favour of the development. The appeal history, which determined the site to be sustainable, carries significant weight. The delivery of 72 affordable units, of which 54 will be socially rented, also carries significant weight, given the need for 35 affordable homes per year and the limited number of remaining sites within Wingerworth in the current local plan. The commitment to 10% gain in habitats and hedgerows, BNG, on or adjacent to the site, and a gain in watercourse units also carries significant weight in favour of the proposal. Overall, therefore, officers are of the view that these benefits outweigh the policy, limited landscape and limited heritage harm, and as such are recommending that the application be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, I'm just going to say welcome along, Alex. I know you're a little bit late. I'm going to let you take part in the debate. because obviously you'll have seen most of that information that's been presented, but obviously we've not seen the speakers yet, not heard from the speakers. So right, the first speaker is going to be Neil Baker on this item. Right, Councillor Baker, you have 3 minutes to speak when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. At this morning's site visit, we all saw the state of the landscape public open space on phase 1 of this development, which was undertaken some 12 years ago and has been supposedly maintained by the same developer since then. You should get a feel from that what is likely to be delivered for the community against what is promised. 3 minutes is far too much shorter time for me to deal with this application properly, which is phase 2 of the development. I will deal with the local plan, sustainability and affordable housing. Unless significant infrastructure improvements are undertaken, further significant housing development in Wingerworth is completely unsustainable and contrary to local plan policy SS1, sustainable development. Being outside the defined settlement limits, the proposed development is contrary to policy W2 of the Wingerworth Neighbourhood Plan, as it would have an adverse impact on the local community, existing infrastructure and highway network. So, as such, it is contrary to policy SS9 brackets 1 close brackets. The lack of school provision makes this development also unsustainable. The weight given to the local plan should not be diminished. It is now nearly 7 years since the appeal decision, so the decision should carry little weight now. Section 7.15A of the officer's report notes 40% affordable housing to be a mixture of 75% social rent and 25% affordable rent, and to be revised mixed of sizes which meets the identified need of the parish. This identified need of the parish comes from the Housing Needs Assessment published in October 2024 that identifies a need for affordable housing within the Wingerworth parish at 35 per annum. The 35 number is based on section 8.17 of the HNA, in which, a quote from the report, the analysis suggests an annual need for 290 affordable homes if all the needs were to be met. The word suggest is important. I strongly dispute these figures being used as if they were material facts. So the figure of 35 per annum should not be relied upon to make big decisions such as this. The assessment also contains a number of other caveats. In section 8.1 it says, importantly, the survey data discussed in this section above does not support outputs at parish level, and yet why are we relying on outputs at parish level? Also, it says the total number of affordable rental homes required. Also, my opinion is the total number of affordable homes at 290 far exceeds the number previously put forward by this council at any time in the last 10 years. It comes with its own caveats. The total of around 206 of the need is from households with accommodation. Removing these from the need of 290 gives a figure of 84 per annum.
Are you summing up, Councillor Baker? You've had your 3 minutes. Can you just bring it to a close, please?
The thing I'd like to first say, the schools are oversubscribed. There is no sufficient plans to build a new school because we're waiting 13 years for it. And there's no room left at Hunloke Park, which is the designated school, to receive the Section 106 monies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Gillett?
Chair, first of all, thank you to Councillor Baker, and I should have said thank you to Councillor Jones as well for representing the communities and making the case for them. I think that's really important. I'm also appreciative that you only get 3 minutes and therefore you have to pick and choose, and therefore some of the questions I might ask you will tease out perhaps some of the issues you haven't mentioned. And I'm also conscious that you wear 2 hats really today. You're here as a ward member, but you represent the parish council, I think, as well.
I do indeed.
And so I hope people won't mind if I stray into that side of it as well, and perhaps ask you some questions around that if you're comfortable with that. You've obviously, in terms of the objections, you've concentrated on the character of the village and the impact it will have on that. And I live local, so I understand the community, but not necessarily everybody does. And perhaps, do you want to expand on that side of your argument a little bit further?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Gillett. as the report before you suggest, or states, Wingleworth is a community of mainly owner-occupied, owner-homed houses. The rental part of Wingleworth, sector in Wingleworth, is very small. Also, Wingleworth is a community where people are of older in nature, and many of the developments date back 40 years. This housing assessment also talks about something called right sizing, where it encourages the council to consider some form of inducement or planning whereby people like myself that live in a 4-bedroom house in Wingleworth should be encouraged to sort of vacate that premises and allow for more smaller properties of rented nature. I would question the need for social engineering of the community of Wingleworth. The community of Wingleworth seems quite happy as it is. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Again, that leads into actually another question I was going to ask, because in the objections, both from certainly the parish council, there's comments about the property types and in particular number of bungalows. And I'm sure officers will tell me in due course which of these issues we can and can't take into account in taking the decision. But I would like to give you the opportunity to comment on that if there's anything further you'd like to say about the housing types within the development.
Well, some of it's very confusing to me, Councillor Gillett. Some of the properties are built to be adapted for disabled use, and yet they're at the top of the development. You've all seen the slope today, and the bus stop is right at the bottom of the development. And yet we're going to give everybody a travel pack with each house, explaining how they can use environmentally friendly travel plans. Those of us who are not as young as we once were might find that rather interesting. So I can't understand the layout in particular. I think it may have been crafted in an attempt to win the planning permission, rather, as I've just said, to satisfy the actual need in the village. At the moment, another development, one on appeal, is currently constructing 3-bedroom detached bungalows for the over 55s, and that is off the Tupton roundabout. There are lots of bungalows. In fact, Wingleworth is blessed with more bungalows, I believe, than any one of the, or most of the other towns or villages in the area. So I cannot understand the housing mix unless it is crafted purely to try and win a planning permission for a development outside the settlement limit.
Can I understand what you're saying in general? Are you against any further development in Wingleworth full stop, or just against this particular application? Is that?
Members will be aware of the call for sites, and the local plan is up for review anyway. And there are a number of sites identified around Wingleworth which the parish council was asked to comment on that might be included in a new local plan. And the new local plan could come into being, if the timings are correct, before the existing housing supply, affordable housing supply, runs out in Wingleworth. I question the 2-year figure. I would more say it's going to be 4.8 years at the rates that I believe is appropriate. And so the Wingleworth Parish Council did not object to some of those sites per se. This one in particular, being located to so close to the existing development and off an existing road that's already quite busy and has drainage issues, the Parish Council did object to that. It also objected to one on fields off Nottingham Drive because of the density of housing. But the others, it left the council time to think about those and decide whether they were going to be included in the local plan or not.
Councillor Baker, you've talked a lot about the infrastructure and the lack of infrastructure, and the report deals with how a lot of that could be dealt with. You made your comments on that. I noticed that when the parish council made its objections, it just gave the objections and then didn't go on to say, but if we did lose, these are what we wanted, and gave any priority. And I also noticed when we were there today, for example, the bush stops have no bush shelters. Does your village have that as a policy to not provide any? Because again, that would seem to be a very simple thing that I would expect most parishes to ask for.
We're trying to replace the bus stop on Derby Road. I've been trying for 2 years to replace that, the one that got damaged by a subsidence. I've been prevented to doing so because of the arguments over whether we're having a roundabout or a set of traffic lights there. We have been, the parish council have been frustrated at it cannot directly involve itself in infrastructure, but it keeps raising it time and time again. The Avenue School, we've waited 13 years for that, and yet hundreds of houses have been built and continue to be built out. We expected to uprate Hunlope School. Hunlope School was extended under a Derbyshire County Planning Permission in 2022, but even though it's nearly 100% of the footprint was extended, there was specific reference to the fact that that was not to increase pupil numbers, but just to make the accommodation more suitable for the numbers it already carries. I believe Derbyshire County Council's comment of August this year is that Hunlope could rise to a number of 358 pupils. I don't know where that's going to be built. Those of us who live near it are very familiar with the traffic situation, which is horrendous, and outside Deer Park School. We believe it's totally unsustainable to keep expecting more and more pupils to be accommodated at the existing school. So if and until Avenue School is developed, please stop building houses in Wingerworth. But we're not against to it per se.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, you've obviously done quite a bit of work on the HNA. Can you tell me, in your knowledge, what sort of figure would you apply to for affordable houses being built across Wingerworth? Is the 40% realistic, or what do you think?
At the Avenue, since 2013, only 20% affordable houses have been delivered or asked for. At the recent Hanging Banks development, that was also in the open countryside. 40% was put forward by the developer to secure a planning permission. Yet, surprise, surprise, later a Section 73 variation was submitted, and that was put in for 24% affordable houses. In the phase 1 of this development, which was also won on appeal 12 years ago, there are 20, I believe, affordable houses, but they're affordable houses for partial ownership, some of which have now been bought by the tenants. The concept of such a large number, 50-odd houses for rent, social rent within Wingerworth, is untested. I believe it's untested in the district, unless somebody can enlighten me further where it exists. Maybe in flats, possibly, but there are no flats planned on this development. So in Wingerworth, it is untested, that level of social housing on a development that is not for shared accommodation, or what has been very successful in North East Derbyshire, in places like Homewood, is affordable housing at discounted price. They have sold well, and they sold well at Old Tupton.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. If you want to retake your seat then, please.
Thank you very much, Jim.
The next speaker we have on this item is Mark Pearson, an objector. Okay. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I'm here to strongly object to this application on behalf of local residents for the following reasons. Firstly, access via Spindle Drive. The proposed access is simply unsafe. The junction sits on a blind bend. Widening it and adding a visibility display does not enable drivers to see around corners. With the added traffic from 180 new homes, this risks making an already hazardous junction an accident black spot. Child safety is a serious concern. Many children cross the road in this area, and the combination of poor visibility and more traffic will put them in danger. Residents would also face years of disruption with heavy machinery and construction traffic passing through the village. Those living along Dearlands Road and the Spindle Drive estates would suffer most by the road alterations, noise, dust and safety hazards causing a serious threat to health. On top of this, the applicant's own biodiversity net gain report admits to a net loss in watercourses because of the proposed bridge, of which the design is not known. And the widening of Spindle Drive will eat into the public open space, damaging habitats and spoiling an area valued for recreation. There is, however, potentially a better solution with an access point at the bend of Dearlands Road near the bottom of Hockley Lane. This route would improve visibility at the junction and prevents the loss of biodiversity and protects the public open space. Secondly, non-compliance with the current adopted local plan. It is clear this proposed development is not compliant with the local plan. However, the officer's report places weight on a planning inspector's view made 7 years ago that this site was in a sustainable location. But circumstances have changed. Since then, hundreds of homes have been built along the A61 corridor, including at the Avenue site. The sustainability judgment of 2018 is outdated and should not guide your decision today. The new housing targets being imposed by the government should be considered district-wide, with potential sites assessed for suitability properly through a new local plan. Making assumptions about what is needed specifically in Wingworth without a new local plan in place is premature. Thirdly, the impact on social infrastructure. Local schools cannot cope with the extra demand. Hunlow Park has already been extended. It is oversubscribed and cannot be expanded further. The promised new school at the Avenue has been delayed for years, and with government funding frozen, it is uncertain if or when it will happen. In practical terms, families from this proposed development would likely want to send children to Deer Park Primary, which is more easily reached on foot. Yet the impact on Deer Park has not been considered at all. In summary, access via Spindle Drive is unsafe, environmentally damaging and disruptive. A safer, better access point is available via Deerlands Road at the bottom of Hockley Lane. The reliance on a 2018 decision is outdated and irrelevant today. Development locations should be properly assessed through a new local plan. And local schools are already overstretched with no real plan for new provision. For these reasons, I respectfully urge you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Okay, right, members, do any members have any questions for the Speaker? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your comments there, Mr Pearson. I was just interested, particularly when you referenced the previous appeal decision, I think it was 2018, that approved it, and officers clearly wish to accord that sort of significant weight or fairly significant weight. And I understand the inspector at the time referenced their view that it was a sustainable development. Could you give us a flavour, living in Wingworth, presumably for some time, what's changed between that moment in time when that was approved and now, I suppose?
Yeah, so specifically in the local area near Spindle Drive, near Deerlands Road, there was the Stancliffe Homes development, which was created not long after 2018. I think roughly in the region of about 50 homes built in there. And then along the A61 corridor through not just Wingworth but through Clay Cross, there's been Curzon Park developed at the Hanging Bank site, and obviously houses built along the avenue as well. So there's been a huge influx in new homes in the area since that decision in 2018. So there's a lot of house building that's taken place, and the local infrastructure, the social infrastructure, has not yet kept up with that huge influx in house building.
No further questions? Right, if you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the final speaker on this application is Tom Ayres, the agent. Have 3 minutes when you're ready. Oh, you switched your microphone up, that's it.
Better, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, good afternoon, members. My name is, as has been said, Tom Ayres. I'm a Planning Director at RPS, and I'm here today on behalf of the applicant Ripon Homes. RPS has a long-standing involvement with this site, having prepared the previous application refused by the Council in 2017 and subsequently approved at appeal following a detailed planning inquiry in 2018. Members may recall that the decision to refuse the application was subject to a full award of costs against the Council at the time. The proposal before you today mirrors the one approved by the Planning Inspector in 2018. There are some notable elements that go beyond the current policy requirements that have been referenced already, and those include a provision to provide 40% affordable housing, but of a mix tailored to meet local needs. And that, yes, that does include some bungalows, but it also includes a range of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes. And it's a mix that's tailored and set by a local housing needs study. So it's not one that's been dictated by the applicant. There's also a commitment to deliver a 10% biodiversity net gain, as has been said by the officers, over and above the policy requirement, supporting environmental sustainability. These are, as acknowledged by your officers, benefits provided by the applicant that attract significant weight in favour of the proposal. In terms of technical issues, we've heard from the objectors today, but your officer report is very clear. There are no technical constraints which should give rise to refusing the planning application. Landscape and heritage impacts are minimal, safe access is achievable, and the local highway network has sufficient capacity. The local lead flood authority has raised no objections. These are the expert views, and of course, they align with the inspector's previous decision and reaffirm the site's suitability for development. Wingerworth, as has been identified before, is a highly sustainable location with good local services that will benefit from additional Section 106 funding from this development. In closing, this development will deliver 180 new homes at a time of an acute housing crisis in this country, where house prices have spiralled out of reach of many people. If you are in the good, fortunate position to own a 4-bedroom house in Wingerworth, then I commend you and good for you, but there are many people that can't afford that. It will offer opportunities for young people to stay or obtain housing in the local area. And yes, it'll allow opportunities for older residents to downsize if they wish to do so. It will support a balanced community. It will help the council maintain a 5-year supply of housing land. It will protect the council against a surge in speculative applications for further housing in Wingerworth and other locations in the near future.
Are you summing up? You've had your
Finally, I just want to say that I commend your officers' report and their efforts to get this application to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, members, any questions? Councillor Gillett?
Again, since I've put some questions to the objectors, I think it's only fair to give you a chance to respond to some of those as well. And again, officers may tell me that the answers might be something ultimately we can't take into account, but I think they should be aired so that people can hear what the answers are, particularly when you look at what some of the objections are and some of the issues that are being covered. As you're probably aware, we went on a site visit this morning to look at the site, and the first thing we saw was the public open space from phase 1 and the poor state of that, to be honest with you, and it doesn't inspire confidence as to the delivery of a lot of the initiatives around this. And I think, as you've acknowledged, there are issues on the infrastructure. You're saying you're going to deal with those as part of the application. But do you want to comment on and perhaps give us some reassurance that you will keep your word in terms of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. I mean, the applicant can't be here, unfortunately, but if they were, I'm sure they'd tell you that the provision of the public open space will be cemented within the context of a Section 106, and that will allow the development on this occasion to deliver the open space in accordance with the terms of that agreement. That will mean that both the quality of the open space will be subject to officer agreement and have to be bound by the 106, but equally the delivery of that open space will align with the delivery of the development as well. So it'll go hand in hand, and it'll be subject to the bearings of a legal agreement with the application.
So some robust conditions around that might be appropriate, I suspect, if I and the committee were to come down on that side. And obviously we're still making our mind up at this stage, but it did raise a question mark in my mind. I just want to put that on record, as it were. As part of the 106, as I say, there are a number of issues that haven't been fully addressed in the report. I commented to the Councillor Baker about the bus stops in terms of the lack of bus shelters, and I think if you want to encourage people to use buses, having a shelter there is a good part of doing that. There's also, I think, the Public Right of Way Department were requesting funding to improve footpaths number 2, which is the one that goes up Hockley Lane, and that's not been addressed. Do you want to comment on those two issues at all?
I mean, I think the officers have got to make a decision over what mitigation is required to address the issues that the application raises and the impacts the application has. You know, we've been very happy to enter into Section 106 conversations with the Council and the statutory consultees and to commit to a whole suite of financial contributions and improvements that have been required as part of the application. And that includes provisions to improve accessibility as well. That is something that the application will deliver. In terms of specific items of footpath improvements, if they were required as part of this application, then I'm sure we would have been happy to deliver them. If they're not required, then obviously the applicant's under no obligation to deliver those.
And in the late report that we've had, and the officers obviously deal with that, but again, just to put it in the public domain, as it were, that there's lots of concerns from some of the local residents that Hockley Lane will be used as a rat run, and the officers have dealt with that side of it. Would there be any plans to be using it as part of the build process as well, or would you gain access to and from the site completely without using Hockley Lane at all?
I think we'd look to agree a construction management plan, including the means of access for construction with the council already. If it's not, I'm happy to agree for that to be a suitable condition to be on the application, such that construction management is agreed by condition.
Because obviously, as a private road, if there's any damage to that, then ultimately, if it's not picked up at the time, it may fall on the residents who actually own it, rather than on the public purse, as it were. And it's bad for anybody, but it's something that perhaps just does need looking at.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy for a condition to be as detailed as it needs to be to ensure that those impacts aren't sort of exacerbated by the construction process. So I'm happy to agree the wording and the details of that condition with officers if obviously if approval is granted today.
And just one other issue that came up while we had the site visit, I believe there will be an access from the far eastern end at the top of the hill to the farmer's field at the other end. Will that be governed by any restrictions at all, and just for the use for the purpose to get, in effect, from the farmer's building, the farm, to the field? That's what it will be used to.
I don't think that's... I can't picture it, to be honest, but I'm not sure if there are any restrictions surrounding it or anything. But,
okay. Thank you.
So.
I have one question for you, if that's all right. So, have we got anybody? Oh, sorry. It's just on the housing needs assessment, actually. I've just noticed that the three-bedroomed accommodation need assessment was saying 25%, and we're delivering 47% of three. Is there any specific reason you kind of, from looking at the figures that you've got, your numbers for 2 and 1 bedroom are down, and then your number of 3 bedroom are vastly more than what's required by the housing need assessment? Is there any particular reason that's been
Is
done
that
like
the local housing need assessment?
Yes.
Or okay. I don't think there's any particular. I'm not aware of any particular need for that, other than it's likely that the provision and mix of housing has gone some way to reflect what was approved previously, Chair. So it may be that there's a slight discrepancy between what was proposed as a result of what was approved previously and what's reflected in the housing needs study. It can't always be the case that the provision and the mix is exactly as is required by local people, but we try and get as close as we can.
My point is that it's a big disparity from the need assessment to double the numbers on the 3 beds from what.
It may be surrounded. It may be relating to the fact that those are sort of suitable property considered by the applicant to be suitable properties for the local area and for this particular part of the district. But overall, I think the mix is a balanced one which caters to different needs of the community.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dare.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I wondered if I could ask if you could explain a bit more detail around why the developer wasn't able to build out the site following the previous appeal, rather. What were the barriers? And I suppose what I'm trying to get to is what assurances can we have that we won't be in this situation again in a few years' time with a slightly different application that hasn't happened again.
Thank you. It's a good question. I wouldn't want to be in the same position again. This is an unusual scenario where I'm in front of a committee having had planning permission for a development some years ago that wasn't brought forward. But to be honest with you, it was an oversight on the part of the developer. As a busy developer, they've got a number of sites coming forward, and they have the same challenges as us. And it was simply conditions simply were not discharged in time to allow them to make necessary commencement on site, and therefore, in accordance with the permission, it fell away. So it was a very, very unfortunate oversight on their part, which sees us back in front of members today. Oh, and just to add, sorry to add to that, but just to add a commitment to delivery going forward, we have sought to agree a suitable condition with officers which allows a shorter time frame to build out this development, or to commence development, if approval is granted today. So the terms and time frame of that would be far reduced in relation to the normal 3-year time frame that's normally granted. So we're in discussions over whether, for example, a 1-year time frame might be more appropriate to ensure that the development would be delivered this time around.
Okay, thank you. No further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Peterson, sorry, I didn't see your name.
Is there any reason why you're going down Spindle Drive and you're not going right through the corner, as somebody has asked, of Dearlands? That would save you, I would have thought, having to build a bridge.
Yeah, I mean, the bridge brings its own sort of advantage. It's an access solution which has been previously found to be acceptable and safe, and we didn't want to deviate away from that particularly. It's when you find something that's deliverable, and it's it's been subject to technical approval by experts, then regardless of whether there might be an alternative solution, the applicant's taken the decision to stick with that particular option.
They've decided that it wouldn't be safer to go on the Dearlands.
Well, I don't know I don't know how much exploration they've given to the alternative option, but certainly this particular option is, as I said, been one that's been found to be acceptable by the relevant authorities.
Have we got plans for the bridge yet?
We've not with the bridge plans are subject to condition, so they will be subject to agreement with officers. We did do some sort of high-level drawings which accompanied the earlier application some time ago, but they would be subject to further detailed design.
So we'll get them later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just turn your microphone
Yep,
off.
sorry.
Chair, can I just ask one more question?
Okay, Councillor Gillett.
In terms of the 106 provision, again, if I can go back to that, one of the issues is over the park, and I think the choice that's been made, if the application is granted, is to have an on-site park provided by the developer rather than an off-site park. Do you intend to retain ownership of it? And if it is to go ahead, are you happy to involve both the parish council and the district council in the design of the park so it fits in with the overall recreational provision in the parish?
I might have to defer to officers of that judgment. I mean, normally there's a private management company that would manage the public open space, but in this circumstance it may be that there's a separate agreement that can be made that allows the open space to be given over to local people to manage, or to the council to manage. But I'm not sure whether the decision's been taken yet by the developer on that front.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. If you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you.
Well, members, it's now time to ask officers questions. So, who wants to start? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Probably a couple of questions here. The first one was a similar question to what I asked one of the speakers, just in relation to the weight that's afforded to the previous planning appeal. And I think we've heard quite strongly from certainly some of the speakers that the time that's elapsed and the events that have happened within that time, particularly in relation to the way that Wingerworth has changed, if you like, as a village, affects that sustainability judgment. Can officers sort of respond to that and give their take and their view on why they still think it's relevant, why it still carries significant weight, I suppose?
In my view, Wingerworth has still got the facilities that it had. It's still got shops, schools, health centre, bus services. Those are the things that make it sustainable. It's a level 2 settlement in the local plan, so those things haven't changed. Those are the items that make it a sustainable site. The fact that there's more building doesn't affect that. From a point of view of what the definition of sustainability is.
If I could just add, Chair, on the back of what Alice has said, so the current local plan obviously allocates a number of sites in Wingerworth, the avenue around this location being one of those. But in terms of, the report deals with this in some detail, as I think is appropriate, but the amount of land left that is allocated in the current local plan, this applies across the district, but also specifically in Wingerworth, there's very, very limited capacity left. So that is where the issue of the housing needs assessment, which is updated information that has been provided to us in the last year, it's within the last year that document's been concluded. That indicates that there is still a requirement beyond what the current plan allocates. So, this is a complex balancing act, but in terms of the appeal decision identifies this location as a sustainable location for development. Alice has obviously covered the access to services and facilities within Wingerworth, but also it's the fact that the current local plan isn't delivering for that identified need. If the remaining parcels that are allocated for development for housing within Wingerworth come forward on a policy compliant basis, we would only be meeting 2 years of 20 worth of affordable housing needs. And just if I could comment on some of the comments that have been made about the housing needs assessment, yes, it's obviously only a partial picture of an overall evidence base, but it is nonetheless an evidence base. It has a route in asking residents information about their circumstances and future needs, so it is something that we need to give weight in the process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dale.
Come back with a follow-up. Appreciating the explanation and answer and the comments around the definition of sustainability. I suppose from my perspective, there is a cumulative impact of previous development. So you're right. The fact that more houses have been built doesn't affect the fact that there's still, for example, shops and schools, etc. But it does impact the availability of those services to local residents. So the ability to get into the local school, for example, you might be able to catch a bus, but you might get stuck in a traffic jam on the A61 as a result of the fact that we've had 2,000 or 3,000 houses built in that area over the in recent history. So I guess there is a sustainability argument there. The second point though I really wanted to make was just around the Avenue School and the uncertainty. We've heard quite a bit about that in terms of this current review that's ongoing. And obviously I have some awareness from a previous role, but less so in more recent months. I am particularly concerned about the impact of where those additional school places go if the avenue falls through. If the government decide not to fund it, then it's on to the county council. If the county council, for whatever reason, don't feel able to fund it or want to fund a different solution, then that creates a problem. There was reference to Deer Park School as well, which obviously doesn't appear to have been considered as an option, and maybe that's because of capacity constraints. So is there any more detail? I've read the officer reply from the county council, which, to be fair, I thought was quite vague, if you like, around it. Just sort of suggested, well, there are options and we'll deal with it, but it didn't really. Have there been any more discussions with officers at county around some of those sort of challenges, I suppose?
There haven't been anything really beyond what they've submitted. My assumptions from what they've submitted is that they're expecting that they can deliver, if need be, at Hunloke Park, if they can't deliver on the avenue, with appropriate contributions towards increasing capacity. As I understand it, schools are the number of pupils that a school can take is set by the county council, and then they can take that from whatever catchment area they choose. But if they're starting from the most local, so it may be that they may not be able to take from further away, but they should still be able to take from Wingerworth. And the county council is confident that they have the capacity to accommodate the likely number of children from this particular site.
I mean, my reading of the letter was actually that they were saying that Hunloke doesn't necessarily have the capacity, and they do seem to be. And again, this is part of the reason for asking it, because I feel like, from my perspective, it's uncertain. There's a significant degree of uncertainty. But it felt like what they were saying was the avenue would be the preferred option for the to take the additional sort of capacity that would be needed. But if that wasn't an option, then Hunlope would be the kind of the next best alternative, I suppose.
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well.
Yeah.
That they would prefer to deliver on the avenue, but they appear to be confident that if they can't deliver on the avenue, they can deliver at Hunlope Park with capacity increase with new buildings.
Chair, can I just follow up that particular issue since we're on school? Because while Councillor Dayan and I have been on opposite sides of the debate over the Avenue School, on this issue I think we're on the same page. We want, whatever the outcome, we want the best outcome for the people of Wingleworth. And I share his concerns about the delivery of the Avenue site. There's been talk of Deer Park School as well, but the catchment, when you look at the catchment areas, the site of this development is in Hunlope, and I think that's the principal reason, but I may be totally wrong, as to why they're suggesting Hunlope rather than Deer Park. Would it be an option to this committee to ask you, if we were to grant it, to consider, or at least talk to the county as to whether the funding could go to Deer Park, if that was an alternative, if the avenue fell by the wayside, if technical problems arose with Hunlope, but they could build at Deer Park in due course. Would that be something we could ask you to look at in due course if you were to grant the application?
Happy to come in there, Chair. I mean, I think it's a discussion that we can take away and have. I think on the overall issue of, education, like other infrastructure mitigation, basically the first question is there the first question is the capacity within the existing facilities? And the answer is obviously not, because the County Council are seeking a financial contribution of a fairly hefty amount to mitigate the impact of the development. The next question then is where will that mitigation be located? And obviously there's an issue here in terms of the Avenue School and the plan for that, and it being a fairly long term and slightly ambiguous. It's not physically in place at the moment. So those questions around uncertainty are fair enough, but what we've got to have in our mind as planning authority is how far do we challenge that in respect of, has there been a scheme identified by the Education Authority? And the answer is yes, it has. So we can have other discussions, and I think it's a fair point to raise overall in respect that we will have to be very careful about how the Section 106 is worded here, in that obviously we don't want the £830,000 to be returned to the developer. So absolutely something we can take away and make sure the County Council are crystal clear, or as clear as they can be, in terms of that hierarchy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Gay.
Yeah, I'd like to ask again about the single point of access. I know Councillor Peterson's touched on that. It does seem to me, I'm not a civil engineer, but it does seem to me that it's a bridge makes it even more vulnerable. I mean, you don't think so, no? And I mean, I can see that the highways haven't raised that. And is it typical that these estates do have a single point of access?
Well, sorry, go on.
Often, Chair, yes. It's not unusual to have a single point of access into a development of this size. And of course, as in all cases, we are guided by the Highway Authority and their advice. And of course, and further to what David said earlier about the appeal that was discussed some years ago, the inspector at that point went through all this discussion about suitable access. So as officers, we don't believe that this is an unusual situation. There has been some discussion as well about alternative points of access, and notwithstanding our advice to you that you need to judge what's before you and you're not looking for other alternatives necessarily, the possibility of an access at the corner of Dealings Road with Hockley Lane may well be prejudiced by the fact that that lies outside the applicant's ownership, so would need additional thought and involvement as well. So as officers, we are comfortable that the proposed means of access is both safe from a highway safety point of view based on the advice of the Highway Authority and suitable in this instance, and from an officer point of view, we also believe provides a suitable design, an attractive entrance into the site that can be landscaped and and the play area would be there. So we think on all those elements, in this instance, it would be an appropriate means of access.
I've seen problems with estates in my village, or particularly during bad weather, when there's only one point of access. And if then that point of access gets blocked by snow or whatever, it's disastrous. But okay, that's fine.
The reason it's a bridge and the reason why the bridge hasn't yet been designed is because the local Lead Flood Authority objected to a culvert, which was the other option. But the applicant has then agreed to design a bridge which will not have the same impacts on flooding because of the backing up. You know, there's more space basically. So that's one of the reasons why we don't have the full detail of the bridge at the minute.
Okay, Councillor Gillett.
Can I go back to the inspector's decision? There's obviously been comment on that from the objectors in particular, but am I right in thinking that nothing that's been said changes the advice that you gave us in the report as to what weight we can and should put on that judgment 7 years or so ago? It's still the same?
Yeah. Officers are of the view that we should have significant weight. No.
Can I just ask a couple of other questions as well, Chair? Both today in the report and certainly with the objections that have come in that are on the planning portal, there is a lot of comment about the infrastructure, and if I can just explore a couple of those a little bit further. There is the letter that came in yesterday or the day before from the ICB with regards to the GP provision, and I think that's really important. It certainly in my mind, as I'm weighing which way to go, that might be a factor that influences me. And originally the ICB was saying that it's one of 3 surgeries that they were thinking of spending the money at, but it seems to me the only one of those that is likely to be used by the overwhelming majority of these people is probably the Wingleworth one. Are we able to make comment on that, or is that something you can take into account when you actually sign the final 106 agreement, if it is granted today?
As I read their comment, their choice is to spend it on Wingleworth, because they sort of go through a number and then they finally say the one that requires the upgrade is Wingleworth, and that's how much money we need.
That gives me some reassurance. And is there any way of sort of expediting the time at which that's paid? Because obviously the community will want to see some development fairly quickly, some benefit fairly quickly out of this development. A lot of these projects will take some time. The school will certainly take a long time. Some of the highway issues will take a long time, and the recreational facilities, depending on where they are and ultimately who decides on those, will take some time. That is something that something that could be given priority as part of the outcome as well?
Sorry.
Happy to come in there, Chair. I mean, obviously, the trigger points in terms of Section 106 payments are something we'll have to discuss with the applicant. Obviously, you'll appreciate that tends to follow recommendation. But we can certainly be mindful of the... I mean, the key thing will be the evidence in terms of at what point capacity is reached. So it may well be that it might be a certain way into the development that if the population increase is sufficient to bring in the requirement that the providers, including the ICB in this case, have identified. So we would have to have regard to that, but obviously our starting point will be to push for as early in the phase of development as we can, particularly on a site, you know, in this situation. And I think that links to the consideration that if planning permission is granted, it's granted with 1 year to commence development. So, you know, the whole aim of this would be that the development comes forward quicker than it might ordinarily do in terms of at least starting. The planning authority can't control finish dates, but what we can control is start date. And, you know, if we're giving weight to the delivery of housing in this area, then obviously that needs to come forward quickly. So I think the bottom line is trigger points are still to be agreed, but the starting point would be the point at which the infrastructure is actually needed in terms of that mitigation, but to bring it forward as much as we can would certainly be our starting point.
And just one final question. I get that point. That's really helpful. With the other infrastructure projects like the park, you know, We've seen the site as it is at the moment in terms of the public open space there. Could we ensure, as part of this process, that both the parish council and this authority's own parks department are heavily involved in the design and assessing the need there, so it fits in with the overall demand in that village and complements what's there, rather than it's just something that the developer decides for their own convenience, as it were. I also would be interested in whether we can also explore further the provision of bush shelter if the parish council would be willing to take them on. And similarly, as I said earlier, there was some comment, I think, in the public right of way comment with regards to public footpath too, and I don't think that's been addressed. And whether, I'm not saying we determine it today, but is that something else that could be looked at as part of the overall process if the application were to be granted?
Happy to come back in, Chair. So on the, forgive me, Councillor Gillett, if I don't answer all these. So in terms of the highways mitigation, there's been quite detailed discussions with the county council in respect of how the funding would be spent, and effectively what they've identified as the most viable projects at the moment are the pedestrian facility upgrade. I'm sorry, Alice will know the location, but there's a pedestrian facility upgrade and then improvements to the cycleway basically between Wingerworth and Chesterfield. At the moment that's at kind of scoping stage, so there'd be money spent on effectively the necessary research, but then also money into actually delivering that improvement. That's where we are at the moment, and I think in terms of the officer recommendation, that's put forward as the most solid and relatable project that we have to the impact of this development in terms of the regulations, community infrastructure levy regulations that any contribution needs to comply with. So I think any variation from that at this point, we'd need new evidence that we don't have at the moment. And I think in terms of that wider impact, that's considered to be the most appropriate mitigation. That's the view that the Highway Authority have given us. You'll have to remind me of your earlier questions.
The one was, I suppose you have covered most of it there. I think it was the public right of way.
Yeah, so the right of way is complicated by, as has already been talked about in the discussion, that there's private ownership of that. So we've raised the possibility of that being mitigation with the county council. There's uncertainty about delivery with there being private rights of access over that. So in terms of, again, the scheme being relatable to the development but also deliverable, the option that we've gone with is considered to be desirable from that point of view.
Would you like me to comment on the play area? So we would include a condition about the design of the play area, and that would so that would have to come in. It has to be of a value of equivalent to the amount that our parks team have calculated, and we would get the design in by condition, and we could discuss with our parks team as to whether that's acceptable. So we will have control over that.
And consult with the parish council as well.
Yeah, can we?
Yeah, if that was important to members, yes, we do that and indicate that through our own parks team, who have got a very good relationship with the parish council normally.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the 40% affordable housing. The high volume figure in the local plan says 30%. That low value is the 20%. So the 40% is well above the 30 and the 20%. In the HNA, we've built 555 houses over the last 5 years. 99 of them are affordable. So that means 18%. So all of these figures are below the 40%. So I wonder, where did the 40% come from, and how deliverable do you really think it is?
I think the original figure of the 40% came because that's what was put in with the original application. When I think that may have been a figure that was required by the local plan at that time. The figure for affordable housing exception sites in the countryside is 50%, and then the figure for housing development on allocated land or within settlements is 20%. So this offer is above that to reflect the fact that it's outside of the settlement in part. So that's where it's come from.
But based on history of 18% delivery, how realistic is the 40%?
So the 18% is probably around the 20% that would be delivered on an allocated site or in the settlement. We have no reason to believe that it's not deliverable. If it will be in the Section 106, if the applicant chooses to wants to come back, they'll have to go through the method by which Section 106 can be altered. But I believe it's at 5 years it has to be before they can do that.
To alter a 106, Chair, yes, it is 5 years before they can make an application to do that, unless it's otherwise agreed with the council ahead of that. Just to add to what Alice has said, the 40% is also reflective of the affordable housing levels that were agreed in the appeal decision back in 2018. So the 40% was put forward at that point by the applicant, partly, as Alice says, because that was the guide figure in the previous local plan that was still then in place, but that's also consistent with that, although the mix, as you'll have read, is slightly different to reflect a more up-to-date and reflective position for the current situation in Wingleworth and district-wide on the advice of our housing colleagues.
The key word there is the origin. The origin is the developer. The origin of the 40% figure.
As officers, we've not sought to dissuade them from 40%, but we have had negotiation to retain that level in the mix that it is in this instance. And as you'll have read, in view of the situation as Alice outlined at the very start of the discussion, as officers we're placing significant weight on that 40%, as did the inspector back in 2018. So we've not sought to dissuade the applicant from that, and we think that the provision of 40% affordable housing would be a very positive element of this scheme in this instance, and therefore we've placed that significant weight on it.
If 40% was delivered.
If I could just add, Chair, on the back of what Adrian and Alice have said, and just to, hopefully lay potential fears to rest in this respect. Obviously, the applicant has proposed the 40%, and we've given that significant weight in the process. If an application came forward with a different percentage, that may well change the planning balance. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that it would do, but the whole point being we have to assess the applications on their own merit. At the moment, it's 40%, and we're giving significant weight to that for the reasons that are stated. It's above the policy compliant level within a settlement development limit, which is literally separating this site by a line from Wingleworth settlement in a sustainable location. So it's important to weigh all of those things in the round, and in this case the 40% is being given that significant weight. And as I say, if it was a different percentage, that balance might look different.
But in the real life that we live in, it is perfectly possible for planning approval to be given, and they could come back and say, sorry, we can't do that, and give you a calculation which shows that they financially can only manage 20%.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The reason I'm mentioning that is because that will be a different proposition. That will be a different application, and they have to ask the question, and they have to get permission for an alternative scheme before that's built.
Thank you. Right, members, no further questions. I'm going to open the floor to debate. Somebody please start. Councillor Jones.
Can I just say that, picking up on what the discussion we've just had now, in figure 810, or paragraph 810, great weight is given to this figure of 40%. But all I've heard at the moment is its origins from the developer. It can be changed if they come back into some later state when they've built half the estate.
But that does
It
change
worries
the application.
me. Another application, but they can come in with another application. And we know that will carry weight if half the estate's been built.
But we have to decide on what's in front of us, not,
Yes, okay.
not what might be.
Yeah. I really can't support this because I feel that the figure of 40% as one of the significant weight in favour of the recommendation. I just can't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Gillett.
Chair, judgments like this are always difficult, and this is a finely balanced one, I think, in many respects, and it's unusual because we've had a previous application where it was determined by an inspector who's given a judgment of it with some reasons, and we're getting very strong recommendations from the officers that those same reasons still apply, and certainly for me that carries a lot of weight. I think I would be foolish just to turn it down without being able to articulate why I'm moving away from that. But I do hear a lot of, I do hear the comments made by the local community as articulated, particularly by Councillor Baker, and that weighs heavily on me as well, to be honest with you. And therefore I'm trying to balance those two items before I finally come down on one side or the other. As you've gathered from my line of questioning, I think their concerns about the infrastructure are very genuine concerns, and many communities feel let down by the whole system. And what I would not want is for this to be just another example of that happening, which is why I'm keen that if I do come down on balance to vote in favour of it, I want some really tight and robust conditions around the 106 to make sure that they are delivered, and that some of them are delivered very quickly, and where appropriate, delivered with the engagement of the community as well, so that the community gets out of it something that benefits them, and rather than what we think or what the developer thinks is the right thing for them. So that's where I am. I'm still weighing these two issues, as it were, in my own mind, together with all the other planning issues that have been put before us. And in a couple of minutes, you might ask me to make my mind up, but that's where I am anyway, Chair.
Anybody else? Councillor Dale?
Yeah, strangely, quite agree with Councillor Gillett, actually, in terms of the explanation of this application as being one that's finely balanced. I certainly don't envy the position that officers have been placed in on this one, because it's an unusual one, having had the previous refusal and then the appeal, and then lots happened in that time frame. So, and I certainly take the advice, the steer that we're getting from officers very seriously. I have to say, I think I do fall to a different view. One of the key things that has happened since 2018 is that we have now got an adopted local plan. That was a key factor previously, and as part of that local plan, we have quite a robust policy around settlement development limits. This is a development that's outside of those settlement development limits. It's not an allocation within the local plan. And so it is contrary to a number of policies within the local plan and neighbourhood plan. I recognise the challenge we're in terms of 5-year housing land supply and the fact that we have this appeal judgment from a few years ago. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that I certainly respect the opinion of officers, but I come to a different view as to the weight to afford that previous planning appeal document. And I think it's important that we are robust with our local plan. And if that means refusing and going to appeal again, it will be a good test to demonstrate the robustness of the local plan. So I think, and to add to that, just the cumulative development impact. I mean, I certainly understand the comments from residents, and I think we all see it, particularly in relation to the amount of development in the south of the district and the infrastructure strain. And I do think that is something that has changed a bit, or quite a bit, since 2018 as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. Anybody else want to contribute? I think this is a very finely balanced decision, to be honest, and I can see both sides of the argument. I think it's where we lay most weight, and I think there's a clear need, which is swinging me a little bit more to approval on this application. But I'm now going to open the floor to motions if no one else wants to contribute. Councillor Rouse.
Yeah, I'd like to go with our officers' recommendations.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Peterson. Right, we have a proposal on the floor, and that is to go with officer recommendation. I think we need to tighten that down.
Before you take that, can I just add to that, because I think that's the way I'm going as well, that officers take into account all the issues that we've discussed today, particularly about the robustness of it, and that those powers are left with officers in consultation with yourself and the Vice Chair to reflect that as best you can within the constraints you have to work with as well.
Everyone in agreement with that? Right, okay, we will put that to the vote. Right, that is 6. Sorry? Are they not? There's 10 of us and somebody's not voted. Not that I think it'll change the outcome. Right, well that motion's carried, so no, we've got it. It's not going to make any difference. Right, thank you, members. That motion's been carried, and approval has been granted with the conditions being outlined by officers. Thank you very much. Right, members, we now move on. Find you let Councillor Gare come back in first. Right, item 9 is planning appeals. I'll now ask officers to run through the next report. Item 9, appeals lodged and determined. So I presume you're doing this one, Adrian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to run through the appeals report, you'll see as normal we've set out the appeals lodged and the appeals then allowed and dismissed. Some interesting appeal decisions here, which hopefully members are now receiving the précis that we provide on them, which we hope is helpful in addition to your reading of the overall paper that's set out. And there's some interesting decisions, as I say, that have been received over the past period. And the first that members will note is the enforcement appeal that was allowed at Barlow Lees Lane at Barlow, which I think is the appeal being allowed. But in terms of that appeal, it was really pleasing to get the feedback of the inspector on how colleagues in the Council's planning enforcement team dealt with a very difficult matter, but in a sensitive and very professional way, and it was very pleasing to receive that feedback in terms of that decision. Just on the other appeals that have been allowed, Chair, I just got a couple of points I did want to make. I won't go through them all, but I did want to raise the issue of the 2 appeals at Gill Lane at Grassmore, which were in relation to applications made under permitted development prior notification for the conversion of 2 barns at Grassmore, and the 2 ladies on my right dealt with these matters, and we were very pleased with the outcome, which set out that the council's manner in which we're dealing with these things is in terms of the step-by-step process that we're asked to do that with. We've been following very well, and that the conclusion we reached in this instance, having followed that pattern, was in accordance with the advice that the inspector had looked at and taken, and in terms of how we dealt with them. So very pleased with the way that decision was handed down to us, and of course the outcome. The other one I did want to mention is the application and the appeal at the Rosings at Hundall, which members may recall was a very difficult matter that you had to deal with at planning committee, where you were faced with many issues, but not least the personal circumstances of the applicant and a fallback position. And the debate that you had was very far-reaching and full. But in terms of the decision, the inspector in that instance goes through that process again in very fine detail and sets out how all those matters should be weighed, and I think wrote a very full and very clear decision letter. The appeal was dismissed, which is obviously backing up the decision that you took at planning committee. But in terms of how that matter was dealt with by yourselves and by officers, I think was affirmed in terms of how those matters were weighed in planning terms in the decision that was reached. So again, I'd recommend the reading of that in terms of how the issue of personal circumstances and fallback position in particular were handed down. Happy to take questions on the others, Chair, but I think those were the primary issues that I'd ask members to note of in terms of your decision making in the future.
Any questions? Councillor Dale?
I know it's not on the report, and perhaps that's because of the time lag and the only relatively recent decision. But I did just want to commend the planning team on the dismissed appeal at Chesterfield Road and Dromfield. Obviously, I presume that's not on this here because it's only just come out, so it'll be on the next report potentially. But while I'm here, I'll say it. Thank you very much to all of you for a very, very well thought case, and certainly had a lot of feedback on social media to say thank you for everything that was done on that, and I think we defended it extremely well, and presented a really credible, robust case, and I think the right outcome was achieved, I suppose. So yeah, just thank you, Chair.
If I can just come back on that. Firstly, thank Councillor Dale for those comments, Chair. It's always good, of course, to get positive feedback, so I'm grateful. Thank you. Kerry, who's sitting 2 steps from my right, was front and centre in that, so it's really to her and other colleagues that should be directed, and so I'm pleased that Kerry's here to hear it from yourself, Councillor Dale. But it does go to show that the advice that we seek to give you is, as officers, we seek to be balanced and give you sound advice. Sometimes you don't necessarily like to hear some of the things that we're advising you on, but it does show that it works in all respects, both in terms of when we recommend approval and when we recommend refusal. We don't come to those conclusions lightly. But in terms of Chesterfield Road at Dromfield, the design agenda that the council has, and which David has been at the centre of promoting, as you'll know, since he arrived, it does show that that agenda is important to us as officers in getting good outturns and good solutions for the communities that we're here to serve.
Just if I could add, Chair, and it was interesting the commentary around successful places as a design guide, because the inspector seemed to be quite pleased with it as a document, which I was not surprised with, but it's quite an old document now, is it not? So it just felt like it was strong and encouraging that she was pleased that we had that document and that she afforded it sort of pretty substantial weight, which was good.
We are looking at the moment to refresh and review that, so with the assistance of colleagues and outside assistance as well. So we hope we make that document more robust in the future, that we can use it in directing good design outcomes.
Right, and I would like to mention actually that I thought the Gill Lane report was very, very well done. And I did email you on that and to say well done. I have no urgent business. Is everyone happy to note that report? Right, I have no urgent business, so I will close the meeting.